What is up? Welcome to the American Peloton. I am Jonathan Crane, mediocre Cat 2 out of Birmingham, Alabama.
And I'm Ben, former elite mountain biker, head coach at Skyway Cycling, and team director at Skyway, presented by Domestique Coffee. It was Tulsa week.
I'm going to say the most fun racing to watch that we've had this season, maybe some of the best racing in recent memory, like from a spectator standpoint.
Yeah, it was really fun, really interesting. Lots of things to talk about on the men's and women's side.
Yeah, our various group chats were going crazy all weekend with, did you see this? Did you see that?
Oh, it was
So
insane.
yeah, let's get straight into the women's racing, I guess. So we got to acknowledge like mixed bag for Legion on the weekend, but very dominant on the women's side. Like clearly the strongest team on the women's side this past weekend.
Yeah, for sure. They came out and would have won all three races. Um,
Save
but
for, yeah, you want to
yeah,
go there first?
No,
I
no. Well, I'll talk about what sort of like surprised me in a not great way. I expected to see more out of Denver and a little more out of Miami Knights. There was a lot of teams that did surprise me. I think DNA had a really good weekend, all things considered, and Legion. I think a little bit of a mixed bag, but clearly dominant when it comes to the women's races.
I think that what we saw on the women's, like, we kind of don't need to go through each individual race as much on the women's side because there was a pretty consistent pattern through the full weekend, which was that it kind of played into Legion's hands a little bit that other teams were not testing them as much. We didn't really see anything significant. I rewatched all the women's races today. I don't think I saw anything get away that had more than 15, 20 seconds at any given time.
Yeah,
And I think that was a product of just like the strength of Legion and the strength of DNA and the fact that they both wanted a field sprint. Now, there were
yeah,
times, that's not to say that nobody tried. The NCL teams definitely made several attempts, and then some of the other teams, LA Sweat, Butcher Box. But what was happening, especially the second day on Arts District, and this was like really apparent upon rewatch, was either Legion or DNA didn't have someone in the move and then they would be chasing hard, or Legion or DNA would put someone in the move and that person was not pulling through.
yeah.
And there was never a time that a group got away that had like Denver and Miami and LA Sweat and Butcher Box, or some such combination that didn't also have two or three riders from either Legion or DNA that were not pulling. And that's really all it takes for, if you look back and in a group of three you've got one that's not pulling, you're probably not going to take that to the line.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of that happening. But if I was Miami Knights, I don't know why they were involved in that because I would have really backed Andrea Sears' sprint a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um,
they may have been doing that, and the Legion lead out train is just so strong that it's
yeah,
hard to get around them, especially on the second night in the Arts District. The Legion
yeah,
lead out train, like upon rewatch, the Legion lead out like split the race down. It looked like
okay,
a breakaway at the finish because of how hard the Legion train split it.
that makes sense. but but still, like Miami Knights still trying to like get into moves and stuff. Like if I was them, I still would have maybe. But again, the Legion train is so strong that it's
Right.
hard. It's hard for a lot of these girls to overcome that.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a hindsight is 2020. Like maybe Miami would have had it to stitch that together, and I Sear was in the mix most days and
Yeah,
maintained like really consistent finishes. Held the ACC overall jersey. The first race on Friday was the ACC race, so that was the only one that counted towards that. But really consistent finishes. But they were. It seems like their strategy was holding strong from what we've seen and what we've talked about on this channel and other races, which is like about half of their squad is off the leash and going for moves, and then the other half is kind of like you guys shepherd Andrea to the finish. And I
yeah,
don't know if it's exactly 50-50, but it does seem like it's about 3-2 or something like that. Um, and I don't think three 3 riders is not enough to really challenge the Legion train, especially
Yeah.
not when you've got the Legion train and then the DNA train.
Right. Yeah, they would have had to fully commit, all six women to that to really make that work. And it's just one of those things where I think the Legion women's team is sort of the way we saw the Legion's men's team in that 2019, 2020, 2021 era where there weren't teams that could match. We're kind
Yeah.
of seeing that happen with the women's squad where the races they are able to control them start to finish.
Yeah.
And the other women's teams are going to really have to level up if they or race completely different and form some inter-team alliances or intra-team alliances to really make the Legion women have to work that much harder. I don't know.
And we'll get there, but we are like starting to see that happen on the men's side, both in terms
Yep.
of other teams trying different strategies and figuring out ways to race against Legion so that they can't be as dominant through the whole race, and also just like more teams building out more solid rosters and having a little bit more depth and ability. We're talking about all the Legion dominance, but they actually did not win on the first night.
No, they crossed the line first, but didn't win.
Yeah. So on the first night in the sprint finish, really in the final lap leading up to the sprint, there was a pretty egregious, what do you want to call it? Shutting of the door,
Slamming of the door.
said ripping the door off its hinges and throwing it at the person. In the final lap of the women's race, this is at Blue Dome on the first night. Legion Train is sitting 3 deep on the front with Alexis Ryan on the back, presumably either the sprinter or the sweeper, but she looks over her right shoulder and sees a DNA rider coming with speed and just completely goes across. This is like a 4-lane road, and she goes across 3 of the 4 lanes within the span of, I don't know, 20 feet. It's a pretty
It's
sharp rightward deviation, right?
pretty egregious to say the least.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I mean, we were seeing it in our group chat. People were saying like, "Whoa, are they gonna get relegated for that? Is that gonna cause some whatever?" And before we could even hash it out ourselves, she was relegated. I've got the rule in front of me, so I'm just gonna read it out. This is the rule under which she was relegated. This is USA Cycling 1 in 8. No rider may make an abrupt motion so as to interfere with the forward progress of another rider, either intentionally or by accident. I mean, based on the way this looks, she basically looks over her right shoulder, looks this DNA rider in the eyeballs, sees that she's coming with more speed, and moves over into the lane that causes that rider to have to check up. There was a lot of social media chat about this after.
Everyone was basically saying like, yeah, what the hell? Like
Yeah.
you can't do that. And I will give Kendall props because she did say like, hey, I got relegated for this. I'm gonna accept it. Like it is what it is, and moved on. Where I don't know if a lot of other people would have just been like, hey, yeah, I'm taking it
Yeah.
on the chin.
The other side of that coin, though, is that she did try to say like this is shutting the door, and shutting the door is a tactic. I'm gonna say that I think the difference here is that when I think of shutting the door is like you are on the front and you're just riding, or you're in front of the other rider. You ride the faster line because it's the faster line, and that doesn't leave someone else room to come around you on the faster line. Someone who's going to come around you is going to have to take a longer line or cut the corner shorter in a way that makes it tight, and they're having to like make a tighter turn, but you're not changing where you are because of where they are. You're just not
Yeah.
leaving the optimal line open.
Or
I think
actively taking a non-optimal line to keep them from taking the optimal line.
and the thing that's against the rules, I think an inherent part of shutting the door, generally what people are talking about with shutting the door is you take the apex of the turn, so the absolute inside against the barrier, and then as the turn exits, you swing all the way out wide to the other barrier, because that is the straightest. That's the way to make the arc of the turn the longest, you can carry more speed that way, but it also doesn't allow someone else to come around you on the outside. Now, the difference there is that's not an abrupt change.
Yeah.
I think the thing that put this over the line is the fact that even her teammates were taking another line, and she deviated from the teammate's wheel abruptly, to use the exact wording of the rule. It was an extremely abrupt deviation, and I think the intent was to impede the forward progress of another rider. And with any of these things, I kind of think about it on the macro level of like, if this is happening all the time, is it going to cause crashes all the time?
On a long enough timeline, when things get normalized, it creates more crashes, right? Like
Right.
maybe this instance doesn't cause a crash in at the next race weekend, but she doesn't get relegated this race. She does it again. Someone else starts doing it, and it sort of becomes this domino effect of
Mm-hmm.
now everyone's doing it. Now everyone's crashing or getting ran into the barriers. Like
Right.
it's that normalization of this sort of racing that causes more crashes over time.
Yeah, I'll say I'm less worried about seeing her doing it, and I'm more worried about establishing the precedent that it is okay to look and see someone coming behind you and swing in front of them.
Right.
See someone coming faster than you. I think it's kind of the unwritten rule, or the kind of like understood way things work generally, is if someone is coming from behind you with more speed than you and you want to remain in front of them, the way to do that is to continue on the line you're on and pedal harder than them.
Yeah.
If you're trying to swing in front of them to block them, I think some people would say like, oh, that's not how it works in Formula One or something. But in criteriums, at criterium speed, and with the how close everyone is riding, I think erring on the side of like the system that keeps everyone safer is maybe a little bit better. Now, for an
They're also
example of,
getting paid tens of millions of dollars in Formula One, and they're wearing seatbelts. Like there's more,
yeah, I
you
guess
know,
that's what
that's
I'm saying. It's like
yeah,
there's a difference between a bike and a Formula One car. Like
right,
there's no roll cage on a specialized delay.
right. And like
Um,
in Rasan Bahadi's videos, he's saying a lot of like, hey, racing should be outwitting and outriding. Like it shouldn't be blocking, and it shouldn't be this like, I'm gonna push you into this. Like it should be about who's the strongest and who's the smartest. It shouldn't be,
yeah,
that, well, I pushed you into the barrier, so tough shit kind of mentality.
yeah, I agree. I think line choice. It's one thing to take the optimal line because it's the fastest line for you, and it's another thing to try to stop someone with by putting your body in front of them or try to slow
Yeah.
them down. I think a better example of someone exiting the corner and just kind of taking the natural line, and Kendall really pushes this DNA rider off of her in a way that maybe also seems across the line, but
Yeah.
not relegation worthy. But I think an example of like, I'm not sure that you can say the closing the door was okay, and then that, there's an incongruency there.
Yeah. And I
Anyway,
mean, in that push, that aggressive causes crashes. Like if that Miami Nights rider was even slightly overlapping, or was like kind of riding next to her, and
yeah,
that DNA rider gets pushed into her, well, that's causing a crash, and that far up in the field's causing a pile up and all sorts of stuff. So
totally. And in the interview, we've mentioned this, but Justin Williams was on Payson McKelvin's his podcast pretty recently. He talked about writing new rules with USA Cycling. I mean, I hope that establishing some, everybody has different ideas of what is okay in terms of like, should you take your hand off the bar and tap somebody? Should you yell, hold your line? Should you throw your shoulder into somebody? And I think if we could establish some kind of the way the rule read out a minute ago is written, I think is pretty clear and pretty concise. I think if we could have some more rules around contact that read like that, especially in the days of GoPros, there is a rule that says, this is the next rule, 1 in 9. Any rider who appears to present a danger to the other competitors may be disqualified by the chief referee. Now, I think you could write some other rules that could like retroactively be, you know,
Well,
if it
they
comes
just
out that you're slapping people in the race.
yeah, they just need to qualify what being a danger is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I think we need some
yeah,
other rules that about contact and like what is and is not allowed and why,
yep,
so that some of those judgment calls can be made and maybe people start to think twice before, flicking people with their elbow and, setting a precedent for what is and is not okay. After that first night, the relegation, Legion won the next two nights. Crybaby Hill was a
yeah,
real race of attrition on the women's
yep,
side. Pace was hot and people again were pushing it. Miami was definitely trying to push hard, and it was doing more shelling people off the back than it was getting separation off the front. And I think that was kind of the
yep,
story of the weekend on the women's side. It'll be interesting to see with all these brand new, like the NCL teams, definitely strong, but they're coming into, it's Legion's world, and on the men's side, it's taken a few years for teams to kind of, even some of the new teams like ACG is kind of an extension of Best Buddies, and Best Buddies spent a couple of years figuring out how to win in Legion's world, and so I think we'll continue to see that on the women's side. I hope we continue
yeah.
to see other squads progressing to that level.
I think we will as crits become more and more popular, as the money gets a little bit better over time. I think we will see more women that are on that level making the switch over to racing crits and racing for some of these larger teams. And I hope more teams on the women's side pop up and are able to compete as well.
So moving to the men's side, really on the first night, Blue Dome. Blue Dome is like the flattest, fastest, widest of these races, which I think for everybody who follows American racing knows that that means it's the most Legion day. And we saw Legion basically doing the Legion thing on this race. This was the one where they put the whole team six deep on the front, pretty much from the gun, and there were ones and twos going up the road, but you had, Alec Cowan, Sam Boardman trading pulls, and when someone else would go up the road, maybe they start rotating a third person in there. Maybe a Ty Magner starts rotating and they pull those back, but they
Yep.
really controlled that race to a point.
And it wasn't for lack of trying on the other teams. We saw Denver getting in there, DCC getting in there, Miami getting in there, and just Legion really like made a point to control the race. And honestly, in the middle of the race, really outrode a lot of those teams that were trying to line up in right next to their wheel and just weren't able to make it happen.
Yeah, DCC definitely gets an honorable mention. This was kind of like the first we were really seeing them, but they were really aggressive, really going hard. Texas Roadhouse throwing some stuff up the road. This was our first real seeing Blazers at full tilt. They had Spencer Movanzada out here. First time we've seen him racing with Blazers at a big race. People were trying, but this course just set itself up in a way that, Legion could do a Legion.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
think there was also some degree on this first night of like other teams waiting to see how Legion was going to race it. And I think when they saw Legion doing the thing, they kind of had to think better of it. If your
Yeah.
plan hadn't already been that we're going to try and break Legion from the gun, and then you see them, lining up, there had been question marks because they had not maybe performed up to their capability at some of the stage races or some of the other early races. Not that they haven't had wins this season, but they haven't been dominant in the way that they were in past seasons, and this was maybe the
Yep.
closest thing we saw to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is something I talk about with our team a lot is that like you have to have a plan and you can't change the plan based off of like who's going to be in there. Like
Yep.
if you want to control the race, you have to say, okay, we're going to do this and do it. And I
Yeah.
think maybe a lot of the teams like again they wanted to see, okay, well, how's Legion going to do it? We'll tailor our strategy to that. And I think some of the teams missed the boat because they did that.
Right. I think they learned the hard way that the only way you were going to blow through. I think a lot of the teams had the same strategy, which was like, the first 15 minutes we'll kind of feel it out, and then, maybe we'll start trying to throw guys up the road 15 minutes in, or maybe we'll start trying to throw guys up the road 30 minutes in, or maybe, if Legion goes, then we go, and if not, we don't. So the first night was sort of a fact-finding mission, and I think a lot of teams were trying stuff, and pressure was put on Legion, but not early enough. These races are only an hour, and if you're going to put pressure on that Legion men's team doing what they do, you have to do it from the gun. You got to really take it on from the start.
Right. I mean, you're saying that, and as you're saying that, we see Denver Disruptors 4 deep on the front, setting pace, and DCC right there on the tail end of the Legion train. Like, teams were trying.
Yeah.
I think Legion just straight up outrode them.
Teams were trying, and I said Legion was doing it to a point. Other teams did get through that Legion control. Like, there were enough teams trying that Legion did lose control of this race. There was a big crash with 8 to go. Unfortunately, Drew Dillman broke, I think, his scaphoid, definitely something in his wrist in that crash. He fell hand out. It looked like a lot of guys got it pretty bad in that 8 to go crash. But really before that, I think that crash was partially Legion was beginning to lose control of the front at that point already.
For sure. Yeah.
Other teams were testing them and coming around them, and I think the surgy nature of people are trying to get around Legion and take over the front, and then maybe it bunches up a little bit behind. I don't want to say caused that crash, but I think that's where that crash came from. There were a couple of those in the closing laps, and I think it was the chaos of everybody had ideas of how they thought they were going to get around Legion, and Legion, the cracks were just starting to show in Legion.
Yeah, for sure. Like, definitely in the 10 to go mark, that's when they ran out of bullets, right? Like, guys were starting to shed, and they only had 2, maybe 3 guys left on the front, and that's when Butcher Box and Blazers and DCC, Miami Nights, they started going, okay, we got to go. Like, Legion's falling apart. We got to go now. And they all kind of surged at once, and then it bunched again, and that's where you kind of see that crash. And then again at 2 to go, another one for the same reason, basically.
Yeah. So the 2 to go crash, there's a little bit more of a controversy there. Alec Cowan from Legion, we're looking at it right now. I guess he had done his pull at the front and pulled off, and so he was farther toward the back, and then when this crash happens, he's caught up in it. I don't know the specifics of how he went down. I mean, someone went down in the front. It looks like an ACG rider, and one other person got tangled up, and then everyone else is just caught in the scrum. But the interesting thing here, or the controversial thing, we got to talk about it to get it out of the way, is you see Cowan walk over toward another rider, and he's yelling something at him and just stomps on his bike. He looks like he curb stomped someone's wheel.
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy. I mean, I guess people were talking about this on the internet, but I was actually surprised how few people were talking about this, because the footage is it's on the level of that guy at Red Hook who spikes his broken in half bike.
Right.
In terms of ridiculous race freakout videos.
Nobody talked about it until the rider who was being yelled at posted about it. Yeah. And it was like, hey, Alec, why'd you stomp somebody else's bike and then scream at me?
Yeah, so apparently the bike that got stomped may not have even been the person's that he thought it was. So it could have been someone else who's laying on the ground. I don't even know about that. But also, so he was relegated for that. So that's...
Yeah.
Legion went 2 for 2 in relegations at Blue Dome. So kind of a mixed bag there, results-wise.
Yeah.
But I guess to move from the negative to the positive, the finish, we were all watching it. We were talking about it as it was happening. This finish was insane. So I was very sure as we were coming into the finale that Miami Nights had it. I was seeing Alfredo. I was seeing Clever. The crash with 2 to go really cut that group down. We were beyond the free lap rule, so anybody who was caught behind was not coming back in. And, Alfredo and Clever, both great sprinters, several other wild cards up there, but they were just consistently in good position, and no one else seemed particularly organized. Like Butcher Box has guys up there, but they're not
Yeah.
necessarily a sprint team. DCC is kind of a complete wild card for us at this point. If anybody has like a lot of info on DCC, they've got the German national crit champion over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't
Honestly,
really
like
know.
if you know about DCC or if you are somehow watching this and affiliated with DCC, like hit us up, let us
Yeah,
know because
tell us what the deal
it's
is.
there's not a lot of information on it on
Yeah,
what's going on there.
but they were racing really aggressively, and they
Yeah.
have the German. He's got a pretty sick German flag bike that is a German company we don't have. What is the name of that company?
Simplon.
Yes. So Legion's only got two guys on one guy. I think it's tied, makes the last pull going into one to go and sort of pulls off, which cedes the lead to Miami. So my thought is that Alfredo can handle the better part of one lap, and then Clever will just clean it up from there.
Yeah.
And I was very wrong. I gotta say, I didn't even see at this point that Justin was still in the group. He's about ninth wheel, 10th wheel at the start of one to go.
Yeah, I could kind of see his helmet, but I was like, there's no way. Like he's not there. And then you kind of
Yeah.
just see that blue kit in the middle and you're like, "Oh, like
So with like
he's the
two
last hope."
corners, well, yeah, with like two corners to go, he pops out and moves himself up to like fourth or fifth wheel. It's kind of the sprint before the sprint, which I only really noticed again on the rewatch. It's such a good,
Yeah.
like well timed move, and he finds a little draft to slot back into before opening up the real sprint. Coming around the final corner, I still wasn't even really clocking that he was there, and then it
Yeah.
fans out across the road, and it's Justin.
It was, yeah. I was like watching it live, I had no idea. Like even going to the finish, I was like, That's okay,
Yeah,
Justin's there." And then in the rewatch you kind of see like Justin's so good at riding in a chaotic bunch. He's so good at moving up in like weird situations,
right.
and he like in the rewatch you kind of see him, make those moves and get himself in a position. But watching it live, I had no idea he was there.
Yeah, they're so well timed, and he's so good at freelancing. I think because Legion is they have the lead out train, and they've been executing that for the last several years with so much dominance. Like we forget that Justin is really good at. He's maybe even better when things are chaotic. When things are
Yeah,
chaotic, he's able to kind of like see the matrix code scrolling and slot into those places that are going to be advantageous. And I
yeah,
mean, maybe some of it is also that he gets criticized for being aggressive, but in those finishes where people are all over the road, I think being aggressive, you're able to kind of like claim your space more.
yeah.
I was, and I think everyone on our team was really shocked to see him go so well after we all saw him at Speed Week, and he was kind of a non-factor even at those midweek races, right?
Yeah, he just wasn't there, kind of out halfway through, or just like barely in the pack, and then all of a sudden there he is winning the biggest crit of the year, arguably.
Yeah, yeah. So he's,
Uh,
I mean,
yeah,
he knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for a long time. I'm sure he's got a, get fast in 4 weeks regimen.
yeah,
That was the most Legion most, and I think I did predict on the last one that Legion would win night one. So
yeah.
one for me there. I don't think I predicted Justin specifically would win, but I did think
No,
Justin would. I did think Legion would find a way to do it on that first night. That course suits them, and even though they lost control, they still, found a way to get it done.
yeah. I will say I think that American Cycling they did a really good job. I think their key focus for the year is making sure Danny Summerhill wins the ACC overall,
Yeah,
and they did a really good job the entire race of setting him up for those bonus points prems, and he did a really good job of making sure he won those bonus points prems.
yeah,
And I think that maybe if they hadn't done so much work to make that happen, I think Danny could have won this race as well. Because that's a lot of matches and a lot of tickets spent to make that
yeah.
happen.
That's true. That's an additional layer that we've questioned on this show. Like, what is Legion's plan for this year? Because it's like it's not NCL. They're not doing those races. They're
Yeah.
doing stage races, but that they hadn't had much success there or much big success. So maybe that's not their focus. They had skipped some of the early races or sent smaller squads to Athens, Sunny King, some of the stuff we were at. So I guess they probably internally have a calendar, and Blue Dome was maybe their like coming out party when they had been a team for a couple of years, but that was the one where they really made their stamp of we're like the most dominant team. So
Yeah.
I guess Tulsa. I don't know. I don't know what other. I don't see a pattern. They're not choosing all the ACC races the way that American cycling is. So I think we're going to see them doing more of this kind of like shooting their specific shots at specific races, but um, they were
Yeah, I
not as
think
dominant.
I think like in my line of work, there's kind of two methods. You're either laser focused on a couple things, or you're kind of like machine gunning and hoping to hit a target.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the teams are machine gunning, hoping to get a win somewhere. And they're like, we're going to do Tulsa, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we're going to win those. And that's all we're
Right.
doing.
Yeah.
And they're really good at doing that.
Yeah. And I think that shows that some of the other teams have progressed because a few years ago, Legion could do, we're going to show up to every race and we're going to win them all. And it shows the kind of like peak crit thing we're talking about, that we have so many races that are trying to exist on that like pro crit level.
Yep.
One team can't do them all. So now we are seeing a little bit more like, Legion is going to have their focuses. Like automatic was not there these races because this is not their focus. Like they're not focusing on the entire ACC. They're not doing the NCL. They have like the races that they think make the most sense for their sponsors, for the people on their team, like logistically. They have, there's so much to choose from that teams are choosing now, and
Yeah.
there's so much to do. You can't be good for all of it.
Right. Right. For sure.
Um,
Starting to see the effects of that.
for sure. You set me up for a great transition to day two in the Arts District, and we blew right by it. But ACG Night 1 was really gunning for that ACC overall and did a good job of, if not winning the race, definitely being competitive in the overall.
I mean,
But
they were third at Blue Dome with Danny
yeah,
Summerhill. So that's where I was saying, like, he could have won the race if not doing so much and spending so many tickets getting preems.
and Night 2 bears that out because in Arts District Night 2, a couple of things like to follow the through line from what we were talking about in race 1. I think everyone realized we got to start putting pressure on Legion from the beginning. We cannot
Yep.
let Sam and Alec just set the pace they want to set because we're going to get rolled by Legion in the end if we do. So
Yep.
on night 2 from the gun, we saw a lot more teams attacking basically the entire race on that second night. There was a threatening move up the road. And
Yeah.
usually Legion was under pressure to chase it. At some point, Legion stopped doing the rotating on the front thing and they started sending their riders into those moves and then not pulling through. So that's like another way of trying to play for a field sprint, because if you throw one or two of your guys into each breakaway and those guys don't pull through, either that breakaway carries your rider to the finish and any one of those guys, Sam Boardman, Ty Magner, especially Ty Magner. Like you drag Ty Magner
Yeah.
you drag a fresh Ty Magner to the finish. He doesn't take a pull the whole time from the breakaway. He's absolutely winning that race. So
For sure.
that was the way they tried to neutralize it. But on night 2, everybody figuring out that they had to put pressure on Legion from the beginning, and then also ACG not having to worry about the American Criterium Cup overall, they were able to pull it out.
Yeah, with Danny, I mean, fantastic sprint. I didn't like he was in that little like front group, but still just like didn't fully see it coming until he was there just sprinting, and doing what he does best, which is just insane sprint.
Yeah.
It
So
was really fun.
in this one, we had Legion trying to do something, that we were talking through kind of the
Yeah,
beginning and middle of the race. With about 10 to go, Legion tried to do a more traditional, I'll say like UHC style lead out
I
train
would
where
say
they,
very reminiscent of
yeah,
UHC.
that was all I could think. And like Ty was on UHC, so
Yeah,
he had a great, experience for how to get that done. But they had been under pressure and had been covering moves and getting in moves, pulling moves back the whole race in a way that, like, you go back to this race 2 years ago, they had just been fully in control the whole race. They hadn't been challenged as much. So
right.
when push came to shove in the last 3 laps, they had burned through more of their guys and were unable to keep the pace so high that no one could get around, and that ACG was able to set up Summerhill. It wasn't like Legion just like fully lost control and had no one up there, but they were not putting everybody completely in the box like they were able to in the past in this race.
Yeah, for sure. Again, they just weren't able to set quite a high enough pace to really keep things in line. And you really see that with like, I mean, right there on the screen there, ACG starting to move up, next to them in the like,
And
yeah,
ACG had a really good. So if anybody wants to watch, we were watching these. I was live on the YouTube channel, and Ben was in the chat, but we were watching night 2 and 3 live. They're on here. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're on the audio podcast, go find me on YouTube and watch it. But we were commenting on the trains. It was very clear that ACG like had a strategy based on how night 1 had gone. They
yeah,
knew exactly like where they wanted to be in relation to the Legion train. They were kind of holding space together on the inside. They started doing that from about 10 to go. They started moving up from about 5 to go. They had a very targeted strategy based on how the rest of the racing had gone and what they knew their strengths were.
yeah, for sure. They killed it, and I mean, going back, I mean, Butcher Box being better than we expected, um, getting second at Blue Dome, and then kind of like seventh in this race, but still, I mean, with the people that were sprinting for that win, DCC, Miami Knights, to ACG, like seventh is a good result with
Yeah,
that, with that strong of a field. So
so that's a good transition from night 2 to night 3 on the men's side. Butcherbox did the opposite of what I thought they were going to do. I don't
yeah,
know. Maybe I've got the wrong idea of like how those guys are built, but my thought is that they would have their best showing on Crybaby Hill and maybe be, a little bit more not a non-factor, but at the mercy of the other teams, a little bit of luck and a little bit of, right place, right time on these other races. But they did well in the flatter, more wide open races, and were not there really as much when it came to the third day. Crybaby Hill, kind of the most iconic, I guess, of the three.
yeah. I'd say Crybaby Hill is sort of the marquee event of Tulsa. If you like, I think Blue Dome's a close second, but Crybaby's like the legendary one.
Yeah, I mean, we've got our interview with Matt Winstead, Texas Roadhouse, formerly of Kenda Pro cycling back in the day, but we've got him coming up, and he said he did this race in 2008, and the one thing he remembered was Crybaby Hill. So I think
Yeah,
that says something for sure. I think everybody, it's kind of an iconic image, just Crybaby Hill
for
with the
sure.
fans on both sides.
And I'd seen some stuff on Instagram. Like Crybaby Hill literally looks like a frat party, like
It
in the
is,
crowd.
yeah.
It's insane. So I think all of those things, paired together, just make it just this incredible, Sunday of racing.
And as a course, like the hill itself really does factor into the race. So going
Yeah,
into this one, I think even in years when Justin has been very good, you don't see Justin being like a major factor in this race.
yeah,
So the question I had was, is Legion going to let some of the other guys off the leash? And they really did.
Mm-hmm.
We had Sam Boardman getting in an early move with one of the guys from Denver. This was another race. Like, this was a really fun one to watch because there was almost always a threatening move up the road that was forcing someone else to chase behind.
Yeah, that's what they were doing. And it just became this like ones and twos a lot. Texas Roadhouse with Fergus Arthur was
Yeah,
really, really motivated to make a break stick. I think I kind of said like Fergus, he's gonna implode before he like stops trying to make a
yeah.
break stick.
He had a pretty really early in the race, like in the first 10 minutes, got up the road. Um, like was the instigator of a move. There were several other attempts. Boardman had one. Blazers Spencer Movanzada was really he had a good finish on night two.
Yep.
He was really trying to make a break happen. So going into this race, I knew he's a little bit more of a when the race breaks down, when you get smaller groups on the road, Movanzada is a good pick for that. And he tried to
Yep.
force several, and by the end of the race, like the cream kind of rises to the top on a course like this, right?
Right. It's selective. The course is incredibly challenging, and you sort of start to see like who's faking it and who's like really really there. And it just this course is a true race of attrition. Guys are shelling out the back every lap,
It's a very
and
specific type of effort too. It's like
yeah,
you can't just be a good time trialist. You have to be good like hit the hill hard for like 45 seconds,
yep,
the drag on the backside, you know, into kind of it's a very like up and down
yeah,
effort, and you
and
got to be
that
able to do
yeah,
that.
and you have to be really really good at cornering as well because that corner four, you're going into it incredibly fast. It's pretty tight. Like even in the group, people are going barrier to barrier,
Yeah.
trying to make that corner. So this is a really really good course of like if you are a strong bike racer and a good crit racer, you can do well here. If not, it's going to show.
Yeah, for sure. So the definitive group that we had formed with about 14 to go, and it had the German national crit champion, so obviously a good crit racer from DCC.
Yep.
Sam Boardman from Legion in his like second go of the day. Um, Spencer Movanzada, who we just talked about. Fergus Arthur from Texas Roadhouse. A lot of the people who had been animating, and then three riders from Denver. So looking at the makeup of that group, I kind of thought either ACG is going to pull it back or Denver is going to win because they got three guys in the group, right?
Yep. Yeah, that was pretty much what it looked like, and we were kind of talking earlier this like literally yesterday, talking
Yeah.
about Denver, should have done this or they should have done that, and we kind of decided that in order for that break to stick, like all three of those Denver guys had to just put the hammer down and just go as hard as they could to make that break stick. Because
Yeah,
if not, it
that's
was going to come back.
totally. That's the blessing and the curse of having three guys in the move. Literally three times. No other team had more than one guy, so it was one Legion, one DCC, one Blazers, one Roadhouse, and then three from Denver. So the onus is kind of on them to do the lion's share of the work. They have the lion's share of the people in the group, and all those guys on other teams. I think maybe with the exception of Fergus, but I think the DCC guy would have been like, yeah, if you guys want to go back to the group, that's fine with me. I got teammates back there. Same
Yep.
thing with Boardman was certainly willing. This is one of the only breaks that we saw him take any pulls in. He was skipping pulls, but not. He wasn't stopping up this group to the degree that they were on night two. It was clear that they were a little bit more off the leash than
Yeah,
they
and
had been.
yeah, and we had talked about how like Justin and Corey, like this is not their kind of course, and knowing that their typical approach to a series is to take the air out of it and win the races, but like somehow not finish for the overall.
Yeah,
And like, so they were like, you know what, Sam, like Justin's not going to sprint for this. Corey's not going to go for it. Like, by all means, like have at it.
and I think Sam would have been I mean, maybe not like personally, but as a team, they would have been just as happy for Sam to not do any work in this group. It comes back, and then Ty's just going to go.
Right.
So that's really putting the pressure on Denver to have to do the work. And I think it seems like it took a couple of days for DCC to like realize that that kind of was the dynamic that was playing out. In
Yeah.
other races, multiple times I saw a DCC guy in a break pulling, looking behind him and trying to doing the little circle motion with his finger, saying like, "You guys pull through," or trying to wave people through, flick people through, and it was a Legion rider on their wheel, not doing it. And I think by this time they had realized like, what the dynamic is. Legion's not going to do it, and then Boardman did contribute just enough in this one that they weren't getting that frustration that just completely stops up the
Yeah.
breakaway group.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really good on his part. And like again, just incredible ride. The I will say that I was expecting a little more out of Denver. I was hoping, sort of with that 1 to go, 2 to go mark, we would start to see some flyers from them because they did have some numbers, but I don't
Yeah,
know if they felt the gap wasn't strong enough or what to start, playing those kind of games. But
I
I
think they
really
had maybe just.
expected it.
I think other than Noah Granigan, who had saved himself at the back to some degree, I think they had just blown their own doors off to make that breakaway stick because the group
Yeah.
did get very close within like 5 to 10 to go. American Cycling went really hard to bring that group back as close as they possibly could without actually getting there. They didn't actually get there. Um, so the finish itself played out. Boardman kind of stopped pulling through with about 5 to go, and on the last lap, he basically won the race to the downhill. Took that final corner, the technical corner we were talking about,
Yeah.
the quickest, and won it to the line. Which Boardman has probably been on the front of the group for like 30% of the last 2 years. So I think regardless of how you feel about Legion, you gotta give it up to Boardman. He's done a lot of the hard work and like definitely deserves a big win. It was awesome
Yeah.
to see him get it.
Yeah, for sure. And you could see like on his face, he was just so excited to win. He was like, finally, like I got my shot and I made it happen. I wasn't
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
like
it
Sam
means a lot
Boardman. It
more.
was it meant a lot to him, and it meant a lot to me to see that he really cared to win, and it just
Yeah,
wasn't like another drop in the bucket for him.
yeah, there were some pretty awesome pictures from the finish line of him literally just like in tears and his
Yeah,
whole support system gathering around and Justin and Corey coming up and patting him on the back and it was I think even the biggest Legion hater you gotta give it up for that one. It's
yeah,
well deserved and a pretty good um ending to like kind of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat for Legion a little bit on this one. I think we we didn't pick them. I think a lot of people maybe didn't for this one and able to pull it out in like an unconventional way for them.
yeah,
We've said it before though. I think Legion has like the guys that don't normally win on Legion are also on any other team would be the guys winning races. I think Ty's one of the best all arounders in the field. Sam is probably one of the best rouleurs. Ty,
yeah.
Tyler. Yeah,
They're
they have
all
such
really
depth
good,
on that squad. Yeah,
right?
and
Like
it shows.
for sure. I will say that Fergus Arthur had really good. He got a mechanical while in the break, got back in the break, and I think we could have seen a move from him if that had not happened. So like
Yeah,
there were things that I was kind of hoping for with the break that didn't pan out, but still Sam winning is was
yeah.
great.
It was an awesome way to end the weekend. And speaking of wins at Tulsa, we've got an interview coming up with. We had Matt Winstead from Texas Roadhouse who won the Masters 1-2 at the Crybaby Hill just before this race, and we're gonna kick it over to that interview right now and get some of his thoughts. He's been in the sport for in and out of the sport for a long time, racing mountain bikes all the way back in the '90s and stint in the pro ranks back in the early 2000s, and he's back racing masters and a little bit of elite stuff with Texas Roadhouse. Localish guy to us, and had a big weekend in Tulsa, so kind of a natural transition to that right here. Hey Matt, what's
Hey,
up? Welcome to the
hey
show.
guys.
So you are out in Roanoke?
Yep, I flew in here yesterday and flew home from Tulsa Sunday.
Sweet. Yeah, we definitely want to get into Tulsa. So it's been a pretty big week, like straight from Tulsa to this, basically, right? Like a day at home.
It's too much. Yeah, it's too much. I won't do it again. I'm too old to do it.
Yeah,
Oh man.
after trying to do as much of Speed Week as I could do, and Sunny King right before that, I definitely understand what you're talking about. Well, we're gonna get to Tulsa for sure, but I want to start from the beginning. Just like tell us who you are, where you're from, how long you've been racing.
Well, well, Matt Winstead. I live in Huntsville, Alabama, and I did my first mountain bike race. I think it was like 1993,
Whoa.
and was mountain biking, doing mountain bike racing quite a lot, like in the mid to late 90s. That was kind of like when the Norba series was popular, and mountain biking was really getting kind of going after like Ned Overend and John Tomac and all those guys made it popular. So, and then I got my first road bike when I was 17 to really do triathlons, because I did my first triathlon on a mountain bike in like 1996 or something. And I remember I got a Trek OCLV, the US Postal paint job,
Nice. Yeah.
and it was like
Nice.
with the quill stem. They didn't even
Mm-hmm.
have like the compression cap stems. And
Yeah.
I remember the first road bike I got, being scared and riding on the sidewalk. And I remember like making that step from the sidewalk to the street in the cars. And I
So
think I was around 16.
you've been racing off road before you got on the road bike. So
Yeah,
it's not that you were unexperienced or like unable to handle, but yeah, it's a big leap to get out there with the cars and get your head around
it
that. But
was. Yeah. Yeah. And back then, I mean, compared to now, it was like hardly any cars.
right,
Back
yeah,
Yeah,
back then it
yeah.
was like I would love it if there was that amount of traffic now.
yeah. Were you in Huntsville back then?
I went to college at Sanford, so I kind of know the roads you guys on. I used to do all
Nice.
those rides, like
Okay.
out old leads and all
Yeah,
those group rides from Bob's Bikes and all that stuff.
nice. Yeah, Tuesday World.
Nice.
You do that one?
Yeah, yeah,
Nice. Yeah, we did that
yeah,
Awesome.
yesterday. Still going
yeah,
strong.
yeah.
Still going hard.
There's always been a good uh, cycling community in Birmingham. Way better than Huntsville, really.
So you've been racing. You raced some mountain bikes, got into triathlon, and then road bikes from there. Like, at what point did you step up to sort of like an elite Pro 1-2 level on road bikes? How long have
Right,
you been
right.
doing that?
You know, I did not really focus on road cycling until I want to say 2005. I had a running injury from doing the tries, and I couldn't get it to go away, and nobody could figure out what was wrong. I was having dinner with this guy I used to train with, and he was just like, "Why are you doing these tries? You're good at riding your bike, you're not that good of a swimmer, and you always get hurt running." And I was like, that's what I should do. So I think it was '05 or '06. I started as a Cat 5. I had done some Cat 5 races like in college, but it was just onesie twosie stuff, and I never tried to cat up. And then I remember I went up to Tennessee and raced like individually in the Tennessee State Championship weekend. It was like a TT crit in a road race as a Cat 5, and I won every event. And then the
Nice.
next year I joined a club team named TriStar
Yeah.
out of Nashville. It
Mm-hmm.
was a
Okay.
really good club team. We went up to a crit in Maryville, Tennessee. I started there as a cat. It was a 4-5 race. And I remember lapping the field and going through the field and going solo again. And then they catted me up that day, and I raced the threes. I did well in the threes. And then there was like a 1-2-3 race, and I did it too. And then
Nice.
so I
Wow.
was like I was a Cat 3 for a whole year. I was being coached by Dave Brown. It's Johnny Brown's dad.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
And and one of my main competitors that whole Cat 3 season was Nate Brown, Johnny's brother.
Yeah.
And Nate was like 16 or 15, and I was, mid 20s. And it's just amazing looking back on it, seeing how talented he was. Dude doesn't even have a driver's license, and then he races in the world tour and does like 8 grand tours.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, that got me going, and then I did
Right.
a year as a threes, and then I cat it up to 2 and 1, and so on.
Nice. Yeah, I think that TriStar team was still going around the time I started up in like 2013 or something. I definitely remember seeing
Yeah,
TriStar
for sure.
around. That Tennessee scene is still like super strong, but as you know, just like in general, racing is kind of there
Yeah,
are less races. But like I raced with Johnny Brown 2 weeks ago, three
I
weeks
saw
ago,
that. Yeah,
up in. I say raced with, I mean he lapped me, but
yeah. You watched him race.
yeah,
Yeah.
I watched him lap up, and then I sat fourth wheel while he pulled
Yeah.
for another 30 minutes.
When I started racing, Johnny was like 4, and was this little chub. It was like a little what do you call it? The
Pillsbury Doughboy.
Pillsbury Doughboy is just this little fat kid following everybody around at the races. And
Oh
I mean,
man.
it's crazy to think that I'm that old and I have all those memories, but it's really cool.
And you're still in it. I mean, we mentioned Tulsa, but we should say you won a race at Tulsa last weekend.
Yeah, I did Tulsa in '08 with it was Inferno Cycling then, which became Kenda Pro the next year, and that's the only time I ever did Tulsa until
Oh
last
wow.
weekend.
So 2008 and 2023.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
So you were doing
Oh man.
the Masters A, the 40 plus 1-2 this week, but you're on Texas Roadhouse now. I guess let's talk a little bit about just like what the setup with Texas Roadhouse is like. And I know like you got some Masters, you got the elite guys,
Yeah.
and you kind of bounce back and forth, or like how does that work?
Well, I'm on the elite. I'm sorry. I'm on the Masters team. The only reason I've gotten to race with them is was that Sonny King. They had a guy that was sick, and they called me up. Yeah, so I got to go there, and then I'll be with them this week.
That's for
But
nationals.
yeah, they'll have a contingency here for the road race and the crit. In the road race, they'll be probably, I'm sure both days they're going to be trying to get Fergus a good result. I think I would consider Fergus to be the strongest guy on the team.
Yeah, he's having a
Yeah.
crazy good season. I guess for the listener, we have already talked about how he went at Tulsa last weekend, but yeah, we saw
Right.
him firsthand at Speed Week. He got that crazy result in was that Lagrange?
He's yeah, solo off the front. He's so strong,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
nuts.
And that was awesome when he went. Yeah, he went at like it was like 40 minutes still to go, and I was just looking and I was like, I think he kind of has it. Like he just looked so strong. He was every time he came by us was significantly faster than the field. We were like, he's got it. It
Right.
was super fun.
Oh, let's dig into Tulsa for a second and
Okay.
talk about like how did that weekend go? Like, was it significantly different from you did it in 2008 and you did it in 2023? What was the comparison there, and then just like how did all your racing go this past week?
Well, '08, I did the pro field, and I was thinking about it while I was there. I was thinking, why I wish that I could remember more from, because I was going and I didn't know the courses and stuff because my brain I just couldn't bring them back. I could remember Crybaby Hill course. I don't even remember who I went with on the team. I know Jeff Hopkins was there. Do you guys know Jeff Hopkins?
I don't think I
I
do.
don't think so.
Okay, he raced for Jittery Joe's and then with us, but I remember being there with him. Toyota United was very dominant at that event back then. But this time I did the Masters because our Masters team was there. My old teammate Marco Aladia and Chad, we call him Birdman. His last name's like Birdalauskas or something. And we all love Chad. And I raced with them on Kenda Pro. And so they're on the Masters team with me now. So it's cool to get to race with them again. And
Nice.
That's awesome.
yeah, the the Friday was super hot. It was like 95 degrees. I really suffered on Friday. I only got a six position, and the race really splintered on the last couple of laps, and I had attacked and been off the front a little bit alone, and then uh, established created a break, and then got shelled from it, and guys were just attacking each other, and nobody was working together, and I think the heat really got to me.
Yeah.
I felt way better on the second day, and ended up uh, losing out on the win by about 4 inches.
Oof.
We both threw our bikes, and I attacked early on the downhill because I wouldn't consider myself a good bunch sprinter, um, and I'm usually the guy who's going to go early and try and create a gap and do it like that. So then that's what I did on the last day and got the win.
Nice.
So it was a
So
good event, but it's too. Do you guys know Evan McCurk,
yeah, yeah, he's on Butcher
Butcher
Box.
Box? Yeah, I talked to him today at the TT, and I feel like we both were disappointed in our TT performance. Yeah, just the way we felt. And I told him, I was like, dude, you and I were both at Tulsa, and it's too much to be there and have to do all that racing and then fly here or drive here. And I had to fly there, and it's too
Yeah.
close to this. If you want to really
Yeah.
do well here, I feel like maybe you shouldn't do Tulsa, or the thing about it is the road race here is Friday, but today's Wednesday for the TT. And if I didn't care about the TT, I can be fresh by Friday,
Right.
Right.
because I got 4 days to rest for it, but 2 days, and then I got in bed at like 1 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, because
Yeah.
you do the crit, you immediately pack up your bag and get on the plane, so
So you said
Right.
sixth at Tulsa at your first race, like that was bad, but we're talking about like 100-person fields, right? I mean, even Masters 1, 2, like you guys were pretty close to fully filled
they
out, right?
they said Masters 1-2 was the biggest field of all the categories. It was like a
Jeez.
120 man field. Yeah. I had
Wow.
not raced in a field that big in forever. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't see races that big anymore.
I think that with so many races going away, I think we're going to kind of see the era of like there's not many races and the ones that there are selling out fields because that's like the only way for like the cost of everything is going up. So
Yeah.
if you're not selling out fields, you die. And then when there's less races, it's like you got to go to Athens, Tulsa, like these big races if you want to race. But like my race at Athens was the same. It was 120,
Right.
maxed out field in the 2 3s. But I would imagine in your race, like you're talking about all of the ex pro guys you've got on your squad, guys that used to be on Kenda Pro. I would imagine a lot of
Right.
the other dudes in the field in that 1 2 are also like ex pro guys racing. So it's also not a soft field. It's a lot of guys and a lot of guys that are really good.
It's supposed to be one of the hardest Masters races in this in the schedule.
Yeah, that definitely
Yeah.
makes sense to me looking at,
Yeah.
field quality and depth there. So that's a
But
pretty
to
sick
what
result.
Thank you. But to what you're saying, I mean, that should result in the races that you do being harder, because there's not many options for everybody to go somewhere else, and you kind of
Yeah.
spread everybody out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Agreed.
mean, speaking to that, like the speed week crits we were doing, just the the normalized power I was doing for those versus the last crit I did 2 weekends ago, like stark difference. And just because the field sizes were a fifth of what they were at Speed Week, you can sit in a little more. It's a much smoother effort. So I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
races are just going to get harder as the fields get larger and larger.
Yeah, there are less of them and more people peaking for them, and then also just a bigger field in a crit is more accordion effect, more guys fighting you at
Right.
every
That's
corner,
right.
more big accelerations,
Yeah.
all of that.
That's
Speaking of
right.
like all the stuff around Tulsa, like now everybody thinks of it as like this legendary thing, and you got like big crowds on Crybaby Hill. It looks like the crowd was pretty big, even
It was
for you
big,
guys
man.
earlier in the
Yeah.
day.
It
Was
was.
that was that like different, like more or less than when you had been there in the past? Have you seen like a big change? Do
I
you
think it,
remember it being a big deal?
yeah, it was, but I feel like it's more now. I feel like there was a bigger uh, spectator kind of event type vibe to it, and it probably is because of social media. It's so much easier to get something out the spread the word like that now than it was then. I mean, Instagram didn't even exist in '08, right?
Right.
So, so that really has a big luring effect to Tulsa because you don't have, I mean, this race was publicized for all categories. You don't have that anywhere else really in the country. And how cool is it, like, for the dads, for their kids to get to watch their race? Maybe they're at home with the mom or something, and you don't get that. Like,
Yeah. The level of
typic
production was really high. Like
it was really good. Yeah.
we're looking at the stream for you right now, and they're putting graphics up on the screen for $100 preem, and you got like a
Right.
countdown. It's letting you know
Yeah.
it's not just occasionally. We get streams for the amateur races at other stuff, but normally it's like they're just using those to like figure out if the cameras are in the right
That's
place
right.
before the pros.
Yeah.
So there's no commentary, no like our stream. Our team did the Cat 2 race at Sunny King, and our
Yeah.
stream picked up with like 10 laps to go. So
Yeah, I heard
with 10
about that.
laps to go, it was like just Zach from our team is way off the front, but people watching at home, I got a lot of texts like, how did Zach get so far up there? What's going on? When did you drop all those people? Because
Yeah.
people were trying to tune in, and it was, I mean, I'm glad. I would rather have something than nothing, but even something as big as Sunny King didn't have the same level of production. Like
No,
there's
no.
something about Tulsa.
I feel like the Friday and Saturday night, like the pro races, I think it feels to me like there was about 10,000 people there watching each of those days. I mean, it was
Wow.
just like it was a really cool experience just watching the pro race and all the fans out there like blowing the horns and the cowbells, and it was just really impressive. And
Yeah.
just seeing the pro field like there was that one climb, there's a climb, turn, kind of flat, and then climb on Saturday, and I was standing like at the top of that second riser, and it was just so impressive, dude, watching those all the pro field just come up that climb, and it was just the amount of horsepower that was in that field,
Yeah,
and just watching them every lap just smash that climb, and that it was just like, damn, man, that is impressive to see.
I feel like one of the
Yeah.
only ones that can compare to that is Athens, and like
Yeah,
Athens, you can tell where the field is on course because you can hear like ah,
right.
like as they come around, you can hear where the
That's
yell
cool.
is on course. Like by the time the pros are going,
That's
it's pretty
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah.
But is you think it's more than what it was in 2008?
Yeah,
So at least
I
I
really
mean
do.
we always talk about um like kind of the state of the sport on this
Right.
channel and on this show. So I guess that's one we could be accused of being pretty doom and gloom in a lot of ways on this show, but I just want
Yeah.
to like put a pin in like that's one positive is that there are some events that are
Right.
continuing to gain steam and momentum like from a spectator event standpoint, which is cool.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I like you guys' show is I think about it quite a bit, like how things are, and how is the condition of road racing in America. And I tend to agree with a lot of the things that you guys say, and I'm kind of a dooming and gloomy guy sometimes too about it because, I mean, you only have so much talent that's coming into the sport every year to fuel the the participants from the ground level up, right? I mean,
Right.
every guy that was in that pro race started as a Cat 5.
Yep.
So if you're not bringing in these talented kids at that level, every single year you got to have that new pool coming in. If you don't have that, it's going to dry up. And now that you've got so much gravel attention, the talented guys, and there's so many strong engines now in gravel. If gravel didn't exist, they only have two choices. It's mountain biking or road,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah.
So it's like it's drawing away from here and there, and you look at how strong NICA is, and mountain biking's just, to me, it's blown up in terms of like a high school age and stuff like that, which I see
Yeah.
a lot of them transition to road later on, you know.
That's
But
the thing that gives me like the most hope, I think, for the participatory side of the sport carrying on. Like we can say like firsthand at Tuesday Worlds yesterday, the strongest new guys coming out are all kids that got into it from NICA.
Yeah.
yeah,
So there are multiple of those kids that are like hanging with the A group, and all coming to road bikes from the interscholastic mountain bike scene. So I think we got to facilitate that transition as much as possible. Like make it a thing. Make road racing, crit racing like cool.
right,
Which we've gotten
Yeah.
a lot of flack for criticizing Legion, but I think one thing Legion has done a really good job of is like making it cool to do crit races. And if
right.
those kids are like seeing Legion content and saying like, oh, that looks fun, I want to try that, like I think that's probably a huge
Yeah.
you can't even quantify like how big of a net positive that is for the sport.
Yeah, and it's
Absolutely.
going back to that nurturing point, like when Crane and I started doing group rides, like you would just get yelled at by whoever was like the head guy like leading the ride. Like you just get screamed at for maybe sitting on the front 5 seconds longer than you should have in the pace line or whatever, and not doing stuff like that because how many 16, 17-year-old kids got yelled at by a 35-year-old grown man and was like, yeah, this ain't for me. So
Right.
trying
I
to
mean,
nurture all of it.
that's so crappy to hear, you know, like I just hate hearing that what you just said, really. That sucks, man, because I mean, that guy should have his arm on the guy and be like, "Dude, that was a hell of a pull. Like,
Right.
next
Right.
time don't go next time don't go for so long or something. Be cool about it."
I do
Right.
think that's changing. Like,
Yeah.
I hope that now, I mean, so when I got into it, I guess talking about like Tuesday Worlds group ride, I probably first did it 10 years ago, 2013. I was like the youngest guy there. I was probably 23 at the time. But I think there was like sort of Lance era generation that was like very hard nosed, and a lot of what we were just talking about was going on, and it kind of
Hmm.
like weeded out some of those younger guys, and it just like became not cool. Like I got into it
Right.
sort of post like fixed gear boom, but it was right after like the Lance Oprah interview dropped, and there was from
Right.
that moment kind of a steep drop off. So there was like
Yeah.
a little bit of a lost generation there because there was just kind of no way in for people.
Right.
But I think we're seeing now, like, if you were 23, 24, like I was coming to the ride, you're not even close to the youngest guy there now. And I think that
That's great.
shows growth. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
I,
it's awesome when you see like a 12-year-old get dropped off at the start of the group ride by his dad, and he's
yeah.
like, "All right, I'm going to the bar. I'll pick you up after." Like that's the best thing ever to me.
And you see
Best
that, and
thing
then
ever would
he
be
hangs.
he wrote it too.
That is, yeah, yeah,
The dad rides it
for
too.
sure, for
We've
sure.
got a couple of those. They break
Yeah,
off with the
Yeah.
A group or break off with the Botanical Gardens ride, and meet back up at the clock tower at the end. But yeah, that's all. Another thing, like talking about, I guess part of the big reason we wanted to have you on is you've got like so much experience in the sport from a variety of angles over a long time. So like you can shed some actual light on things that we just like pontificate about. Um,
Sure.
so there's this perception now that like I've heard both sides of it, that like conduct in races is worse, crashes are worse now. And you hear that from people who I think are just seeing, the Instagram posts or whatever and think
Right.
that it's getting worse. But then I also hear from people who've been around a long time like, "Oh yeah, there used to be fist fights in the parking lot after every crit, and like, you know, Rock Racing would pick you up and chunk you in the ditch or, whatever,
Yeah.
throw a bottle at your head." So like you've
Right.
you've been around the whole time. Is it better or worse now? Is it the same? Are we just seeing it more?
Are the people who are saying that my age and were racing then, or they're like, I mean, where are they getting that from? They
Right. I
basing that
think
on
it's some of
experience?
both. Yeah, I think there's a couple of people who. Here's my theory on what's happening. I think back in the day, like now, if anything happens, someone filmed it. You know what I mean? Like there's gonna
Absolutely.
be GoPro video. There's gonna be something. Back in the day, if something happened, like two guys saw it, but they
Right.
told two guys, and they told two guys, and they told two guys, and maybe what really happened is, there was a shove and some harsh words, but the story, by the time it gets to that 10th level, it's, so and so threw a bottle at so and so's head, and then he came over and broke his bike
Right.
in half. So like, I think some of those things, like the people who are repeating it, are the ones who heard it 10th hand, and they're saying like, yeah, I was around back
Yeah.
then. They didn't actually see it, but they heard the story at that time, and it's kind of like metastasized in their brain or whatever.
I, you know, I'm not like the best person to talk to because I'm going to tell you what I think, but it's not like I've been racing every year for the last 20 years.
Right.
I didn't race my bike at all from 2010 until last year. So all I can speak on is those years that I did. And it's not like I was even a pro for very long. I had this little couple of years, then I
Sure.
quit, and now I'm here and I came back and I can do it again. But those years that I did it, it's not any different than it is now. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
if anything then it was I feel like the racing then was harder than it is now. And I hope that doesn't offend anybody that listens to it that races, but I
You think it
feel
was
like there
harder
was
because it was
the
like
the
more guys
pro
were
the
stronger?
yes, the pro races I feel like were harder then than they are now. And you look at the depth in the pro field and the teams that are really stacked and super strong and have guys just crazy strong dudes. You had maybe like seven teams, just like a legion, but there's seven of them. And now, now it's not like that. You might in any of the big crits, you have one or two or three super strong teams, but you don't have that kind of depth that keeps the speed high like it was then. I just don't think it's like that. But it's not slow by any means, but it's not any more dirty now. I mean, the racing was aggressive and guys were absolutely aggressive then, just like they are now.
Yeah.
No, no, hell no.
Yeah, I think we're probably just seeing it more. That's kind of my guess, is that it's
That's what
about
it
the
is.
same as it's always
It's
been,
all on
but
camera. Yeah,
exactly. You see it more now, and get everybody's takes on it or whatever, which
yeah,
for better or for worse, I think there are some people that get scared off because they see the like constant stream of crash videos, but then there's
right.
also a level of like, I think we can all learn from some mistakes, or I hope so. Like if we can all see like 100 videos of guys clipping pedals, maybe we can learn not to pedal through that corner, the easy way rather than the hard way. Like we can learn that lesson without having to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think there's a. Oh, go ahead.
it gives you time to analyze what happened because we have it on film. We can go back and replay it and be like, you can really meditate on what they did wrong. And, before the footage existed, it's just like you said, you weren't there to see it, you heard it and blah, blah, and then you move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I'm trying to run a camera for most of my races now. How many times like the parking lot breakdown of like what happened after the race is one thing, and then I go watch my
Right.
footage and I'm like, oh
It's
yeah, there
so
was a
different.
whole other, yeah, there was something totally different happening that I wasn't even, I was so focused on the wheel in front of me that an attack when I didn't even see went and came back,
Absolutely.
and I
Yeah.
totally missed it, and that was what was
It,
causing whatever.
yeah, it is. It is really like that. You go, you go back and you try and remember, like, what did I do wrong, or how did that happen? And like you said, you watch it on screen. It's like I didn't even know that happened.
Right.
Right.
In the fog of battle, things are a little bit
Yeah.
different. So we're coming up on time here, but
Okay.
I want to get like one last kind of like big overarching question, and I guess Ben, you also think of your final thing if you've got something we haven't gotten to also.
Sure, sure.
Um, Strategy wise, do you think the racing we talked about sort of strength and like conduct, but
Hmm.
do you think that the tactics have really changed? And I know, like you're saying, you don't have this constant through line, but it's actually pretty interesting that you have like this point in time that you're comparing to this point, because I think if there is a big change, it's going to be very like night and day to you, you know?
Well, I feel like to your point, I think a lot changed after Lance went down in the whole Operation Puerto and everything, and you had tons of corporate sponsors back out during those years, and it kind of sucked all this money out of the sponsorship pool, and that hurt the sport for a long time,
Yep.
and that really sucked. You know, there used to be big money sponsorship in pro US pro cycling that isn't, it's still not there what the way that it used to be back then. And we, you know, now it's more of it's an economic issue, but you know, Lance and everything started everything, and now it has to do with macroeconomics. But
Do you
well, I
think
don't.
people are racing differently as a result, or even as a result of like, I don't know, everybody like learning about tactics and stuff used to be completely word of mouth, but now you can, I don't know, watch stuff like us talking right now and get some knowledge. You can be someone who doesn't even have group rides in their local area, but like kind of plug in and learn about things. Do you think that like the way people are racing the races
Oh
tactically is any different, or at
well,
that level, at the 1-2
on,
level, like to get there you have to be pretty good, so maybe that hasn't changed at all.
no, I don't. I don't think it's really changed. Like the pro races that I've done, the bigger pro races I've done the last 2 years, those tactics to me are the same. I think sort of what's different now is you don't have these bigger lead out trains. I mean, back when I was racing, you might have back in those days when I got to do some pro races. I mean, now it's like if all Legion comes, you know that they can control completely by themselves the end of the race if it's a flat crit.
Right.
And we all expect that, and the other teams expect it too, and try and figure out how are they going to win, knowing that that's what's going to happen. It's almost like back in those days, because there were multiple teams with that level of strength. I mean, there might be multiple teams like that controlling it at the
Right.
end, not just one. So that part of it's different, but in tactics in general, I don't think is any different. I mean, go ahead.
So there was like more depth so that there could be multiple trains. There would be another train exactly as
Absolutely.
strong as Legion right alongside
Absolutely.
them for a lot of time.
100%. 100%.
I think we might be headed back that way. I mean, if you look at like 2 years ago, and credit to Legion on that as well. I think that they, like, in making crit racing kind of cool again, like they've stated part of their agenda is to raise the profile, and I think you're seeing that they've done that because like 2 years ago they could control a race start to finish. This year,
Right.
like at Tulsa, there was not a race that they controlled start to finish. They tried to at Blue Dome and they kind of lost control in the last 10 laps, and then they didn't control it the same way the next night. They did more of a like UHC, like 10 to go, 12 to go kind of on the front strategy.
Yeah.
But other people 2 years ago, no other train was really able to even contest them. But
Right.
now we're seeing some other teams sneak some wins in. So my hope is that we're going to get back to a time when maybe there's not the same amount of money, but the like talent pool, gets deeper and deeper.
Well, I hope that the money comes too, because that is only good for the sport. So
Yeah,
the more
totally.
the more
Yeah.
money in it, the better, because these guys who are doing these pro races, uh, they need enough to live on,
For
and
Yeah,
sure.
not have to work all week and then do all it's just no way to live. You don't want to
yeah,
have to be on the road all the time like they are, putting in all the hours on the bike and then have to work too. It just doesn't work.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
to the point about like the field not being as deep, I think that could be a reason. I mean, whereas, you know,
Absolutely.
in your day you had more guys that were able to truly just train and not do anything else. There's
Absolutely.
maybe 20 guys doing that, and those are the 20 guys that really take over when the racing gets hard.
You're
So
100% right.
yeah, I hadn't even made that connection. So that's why we're having you on. That's a good thought, is that the economics, drive the ability to dedicate the time it takes to really be at that top level.
Well, I mean, you look at the guys who recently retired, who have had really long pro careers. Just take, for example, do you guys know John Murphy?
Yeah.
Yep. Hmm.
I don't personally know John Murphy, but when I started racing, he was in the pro fields I was in on HealthNet, and I mean, he got paid. He got to be able to race for 15 years and make a living doing it, and get married and have kids, and then transition his life to something else at a in your mid 30s. How are you going to do that? And the team's paying you 10 grand a year. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't
Right.
do
There's no
that.
way.
What
Yeah.
what are you supposed to? It just does 10 grand a year. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You need to be making 60 grand a year
Totally.
Yeah.
racing your
Hmm.
bike, and then you can do it for 15 years and retire at 35 and go start something else.
And in
For
those
sure.
15 years, you can dedicate the 20 plus hours a week that you need to train to be,
Absolutely.
20 plus hours on the bike, plus another, whatever, 10, 15 of like really focused gym work, stretching, recovery, all that
All
stuff.
of it.
That's
Exactly.
a full-time job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah. I know we don't have a ton of time, but when we first started talking about having you come on, you said you wanted to talk about certain topics like mentality and physiology and like what it takes to
Right.
get to an elite level. As a coach,
Yeah.
like those are my favorite conversations to have.
Yeah.
You want to dive in on that a little bit? I know we are short on time, but
We
I did
got
want to
five
give you
minutes. I think we
I did
can
want to give you some
get
time
some
to
good.
go in
Yeah.
on that.
I feel like we don't have time, and like I can't even really say enough to do it justice. There was a lot I wanted to talk about, but we could do it in another time. I think that if you're gonna be a bike racer, just don't do it halfway. Don't be somebody who enters a race and you're out of shape, and you're not going to be a play. I mean, okay, there is a time and a place to enter a race, and you're not going to do well. I get that, but to do that for years and years, like, what's the point? Like, give it your all. Really dedicate your life to it for a while. When you're in your 20s and you're single and you don't have kids and you're not married, that's the time to see what you can do, because you don't want to regret when you're in your 30s and you're married, or where you have kids and you don't have the time to do it. You don't want to think back and think, man, I wonder if I could have really done good and gotten results, and now I don't have the time or the energy to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're 20, 25, or even whatever age you are, and you have the time to dedicate it, go all in, do everything right, read about it, study it, watch you guys' videos, watch everybody's videos. I mean, train as hard as you can, rest as hard as you can, get as much sleep as you can, dial your bike, get every marginal gain you can, take all the right supplements you can, eat right, lose weight, do everything right, and be the best that you can be. And when you race, freaking race as hard as you can. When you cross the line, think, I could not have gone any harder. And that's what you should do. That's cycling.
I
Yeah.
think that's what's so addictive to me about cycling is that, like, so I got into it. I didn't become a two until I was 26, you know, and there was that rule that pro teams, you know, have to take a certain number of under 25-year-old riders. So I kind of
Yeah.
like got to that level where I was knocking on the door, and then I was like, I'm too old to go pro. So I never
Mhm.
had that thing in my mind, but there is always one more thing to optimize. So like every time I
Right.
get done with something and like achieve a goal and feel like, you know, like okay, I, you know, cyclocross state champion, then it's like, all right, let's try and do Masters Nationals or whatever. There's always another rung to climb, even if it's
Mhm.
not to the professional ranks, but there's also always, or maybe it is. I mean, maybe you're good enough as an amateur, but there's also all those factors you listed where it's like, all right, I've been training right, but I haven't been eating right. Maybe, you know, I can like
Yeah.
figure out. There's always like another thing that you can work on and improve, and like that's what makes the sport so. That's what's kept me doing it for 10 years. You know.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I remember in college I got the opportunity to fully do that, and the what I was able to achieve during that time was like incredible. I felt like I was able to really, you know, hit my ceiling in the mountain bike space, and now I'm doing road and learning so much more. And there's always more to learn. There's always more to optimize. There's always, even if you're at your genetic potential, which hardly ever any of us actually get to achieve, there's
Right.
always ways to improve outside of that, and that's what's so addictive. It's this big puzzle, you know, that you can
Mhm.
try and solve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to leave it. But I guess,
Yeah.
you know, if you hadn't won Tulsa, we wouldn't have had to talk so much Tulsa. So we'll have to have you
Right.
back and do a
Yeah,
full like training and
I would like that.
human performance deep dive. Yeah, that
yeah.
that sounds like a really good off season episode. I'm gonna like put a pin in that, and come cyclocross season, we're gonna be knocking.
Cool. Thank you
Perfect.
guys.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Thanks for coming
thanks
on,
for
Matt.
doing it.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good night.
You
You
too.
as well.